Maria had long learned to move like a shadow through the halls of the Donovan mansion. From dawn until dusk, her days were filled with cleaning crystal chandeliers, polishing antique furniture, and smoothing out silk curtains that cost more than her yearly rent. She never spoke unless spoken to, and her presence was barely noticed by the grand parties that filled the estate's rooms with laughter and clinking glasses. No one at the Donovan circle knew her name. She was just the quiet maid, the one who kept the mansion spotless in silence. But Maria carried stories beneath her calm exterior. Stories of dreams deferred and dignity hidden behind a mop and bucket. On the night of the Donovans' annual gala, Maria worked harder than ever, making sure every detail was perfect for the wealthy guests who flaunted their riches without a hint of humility. She wiped down the grand staircase for the 100th time, feeling the weight of countless eyes on the glittering crowd, eyes that didn't see her. Yet, Maria moved with grace, even as her heart ached for acknowledgement. What she didn't know was that this night would change everything. Because among the guests was a man whose gaze wasn't on the glitter or the glamour, it was on her. The billionaire James Donovan. And when the music began to play, he surprised everyone, especially Maria, by asking her to dance, right there in front of the entire room. James Donovan was a man accustomed to commanding attention. His presence filled every room he entered, not just because of his wealth, but because of the quiet confidence that radiated from him. Yet, that evening, his eyes sought something different amid the glittering crowd. When he saw Maria, moving silently between guests, his interest was piqued not by her role, but by the grace she carried despite the invisibility forced upon her. As the orchestra swelled, James left his circle and made his way toward the maid, who froze mid-step, unsure if this was some cruel joke. But there was no mockery in his gaze, only genuine warmth and respect. "May I have this dance?" he asked, softly, extending his hand. Murmurs rippled through the room, surprise, disbelief, and even envy. The wealthy guests watched as Maria hesitated, then placed her hand in his. As they moved together beneath the crystal chandeliers, Maria felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. For the first time, she was the center of attention, not the background. She glanced up at James and saw not a billionaire playing a game, but a man who saw her, truly saw her. The music carried them across the floor, weaving a silent promise of change. In that moment, Maria knew her life would never be the same. The dance was more than a gesture. It was a declaration. The murmurs around the ballroom grew louder as Maria and James danced, the whispered doubts of onlookers clashing with the undeniable chemistry between them. Some guests exchanged skeptical glances, questioning the appropriateness of a billionaire dancing with a maid, but Maria felt an unfamiliar surge of confidence. For the first time, she wasn't just a servant, invisible and unheard. She was seen, celebrated. James moved with ease, guiding her through the steps, his presence a steady anchor in a sea of judgment. When the music slowed, he whispered, "You have a strength that no one here understands." Maria smiled, the weight of years of silence lifting from her shoulders. But beneath the elegance of the moment, a quiet storm brewed. The lives of both would soon collide in ways neither could foresee. This dance was just the beginning of a story that would challenge the boundaries of class, power, and destiny. And as the last notes faded, Maria knew she was no longer content to exist in the shadows. The world was about to notice her, and she was ready. The days after the gala felt surreal for Maria. The mansion, usually a place of quiet routine and unnoticed work, buzzed with whispers and sideways glances. Staff and guests alike spoke in hushed tones about the billionaire who had broken tradition by dancing with the maid. Some speculated about motives, charity, rebellion, or perhaps a fleeting fancy. But Maria didn't care for gossip. What mattered was how James looked at her. not with pity nor condescension, but with genuine admiration. He began seeking her out during his visits, inviting her to share meals in the servants' quarters turned informal dining area, and asking her thoughts on things beyond her daily tasks. For Maria, these moments felt like windows opening into a new world, one where she was more than the sum of her chores. Yet beneath the surface, fear lingered. Could this change truly last? Was it just a momentary escape from her invisible life? But James was persistent. He introduced her to his circle slowly, carefully, shielding her from the harsher judgments. And Maria, once hesitant, began to embrace the possibility that her life might transform, not because of wealth, but because she was seen and valued. Yet, the mansion held secrets, and not everyone was ready to accept this new chapter. The stage was set for a clash between old power and new strength. Despite James's efforts to protect her, the social currents within the Donovan circle were swift and unforgiving. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some whispered about impropriety, others scoffed at the idea of a maid rising above her station. Maria found herself the subject of cold stares during gatherings and subtle exclusion from conversations she once overheard without notice. But instead of retreating, she stood firmer. The kindness James showed wasn't enough to shield her entirely, but it sparked a quiet fire within her. She began to imagine a future beyond dusting shelves and polishing silver. One evening, as she worked late polishing the grand piano, a chance conversation with one of the older staff members revealed stories of James's own beginnings, tales of a boy from humble roots who had clawed his way to the top. This revelation ignited something in Maria. If he could transcend his origins, why couldn't she? Fueled by this newfound hope, she started taking evening classes in business management, determined to craft her own path. The mansion's gilded. Walls no longer felt like a cage, but a stepping stone. Each day, the dance with destiny became clearer, one where Maria wasn't just a dancer on the floor, but a player in the game of power. And somewhere deep inside, she knew the moment to claim her place was coming. Whether the Donovan circle was ready or not, as Maria balanced her duties with her classes and growing confidence, James became both an ally and a challenge. He encouraged her to believe in her potential, but also pushed her to confront the realities of the elite world she was stepping into. One afternoon, in the vast Donovan library, James handed her a book on leadership and said, "This isn't just about wealth or status. It's about vision, resilience, and knowing when to stand firm." Maria devoured the pages, feeling a new sense of purpose. Yet, the whispers in the mansion grew louder, and the eyes watching her grew sharper. The once dismissive staff now measured her every move, while guests debated if her presence was a scandal or a revolution. But Maria didn't flinch. She had learned that true power came from within, not from titles or approval. And as she closed the book one evening, she knew the dance that began on the gala floor was far from over. It was the prelude to a rise that would shake the very foundations of the world she had once only cleaned in silence. The question now was not if she would claim her place, but how boldly she would take it. Months passed, and Maria's transformation became impossible to ignore. She had enrolled in advanced business courses, networked with entrepreneurs, and even started a small side project offering personalized home cleaning services to upscale clients, a venture that quickly gained traction. Her once quiet demeanor now held a confident edge, and her eyes sparkled with ambition. At a charity gala hosted by James, Maria arrived not as a maid but as a guest, dressed in an elegant emerald gown that caught the light with every step. The same crowd that once whispered behind her back now turned to look, some with surprise, others with grudging respect. James stood beside her, proud but careful not to overshadow her moment. As the orchestra played, He extended his hand and invited her to dance once again, but this time, the eyes were on her with admiration, not disdain. Maria moved gracefully, owning the floor with a poise that spoke of the journey from silence to strength. The dance was no longer just a gesture. It was a symbol of her rise, a declaration that she would no longer be invisible. As they twirled beneath the chandeliers, Maria caught the eye of a prominent investor in the room, someone who would soon play a crucial role in the next chapter of her story. In that moment, the mansion no longer felt like a cage but a stage, and Maria was ready to claim it. The gala was more than just an event. It was a turning point. Investors, philanthropists, and industry leaders filled the grand hall, their conversations humming with power and influence. Maria navigated the crowd with newfound confidence, her emerald gown a stark contrast to the dull grays and blacks of corporate suits. Whispers followed her path, some admiring, others skeptical, but none able to ignore the woman who had once been invisible. James introduced her as his partner, a statement that silenced many doubters. She spoke with grace and intelligence, discussing her entrepreneurial ambitions and vision for a future where opportunity was not limited by background. As the night progressed, Maria's charm and authenticity won over even the harshest critics. One particularly influential venture capitalist approached her, offering support and a potential investment that could propel her side project into a thriving business. The crowd watched as Maria accepted, not as a charity case, but as a force to be reckoned with. James's presence beside her was steady, not to overshadow, but to support. Together, they symbolized a new era where barriers could be broken and unlikely stories could lead to extraordinary success. Maria felt a surge of hope and determination, knowing the road ahead would be challenging but filled with possibility. The dance that began with a simple gesture had blossomed into a powerful partnership, one that would redefine their lives forever. After the gala, Maria and James retreated to a quiet terrace overlooking the city skyline. The night air was cool, filled with the scent of blooming jasmine and distant sounds of laughter from below. They stood side by side, the silence between them comfortable and unspoken. Maria reflected on how far she'd come from a silent maid to a woman commanding respect in rooms she never imagined entering. James broke the quiet, his voice soft but steady. "You've changed the story," he said. Maria smiled, her eyes shimmering with quiet pride. "I'm writing a new one." She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of invisibility lift. "Not because you asked me to," she added, "but because I finally chose myself." James nodded, reaching out to gently squeeze her hand. "And that choice will take you farther than any dance ever could." As the city lights flickered beneath them, Maria realized the dance had never been just about movement. It was about finding her own rhythm, her own power. And with James beside her, not leading but walking alongside, she was ready to face whatever came next. The mansion's shadows no longer held her. She had stepped into the light, shining brighter than ever before. The following months brought changes that were both subtle and profound. Maria's side business blossomed into a full-fledged cleaning and lifestyle management company, earning accolades for its personalized touch and ethical approach. More importantly, Maria grew into a leader, not just in business, but in life. She began mentoring young women from backgrounds like hers, sharing her story of perseverance and the importance of self-belief. The mansion where she once worked became a symbol of her journey, but no longer a cage. Instead, it was a reminder of how far she'd come and the people she wanted to lift up behind her. James continued to support her, not by overshadowing, but by encouraging her independence and vision. Together, they hosted charity events focused on empowerment and education, giving back to communities that often went unnoticed. Maria found joy not just in success but in purpose. The whispered judgments of the past faded into distant memories, replaced by the sounds of applause and genuine respect. And as she stood at the podium at a women's leadership conference, Maria spoke not just as a billionaire's partner, but as a woman who had fought to be seen and had won. Her story wasn't about a dance or a chance encounter. It was about the strength to rise again and again, until the world had no choice but to notice. Despite her growing success, Maria remained grounded and connected to her roots. She often returned to the neighborhood she grew up in, hosting workshops on entrepreneurship and financial literacy for young women who faced the same challenges she once did. Her story became a beacon of hope, a testament to what could be achieved through resilience and determination. James admired her unwavering commitment, knowing that true partnership meant celebrating each other's victories without overshadowing them. Together, they launched a foundation aimed at providing scholarships and mentorship to aspiring businesswomen from underserved communities. The media began to notice, shifting their narrative from the maid who danced with a billionaire to the philanthropist changing lives. But Maria cared little for headlines. What mattered was the difference she could make and the legacy she could build. In quiet moments, she reflected on the journey, the late nights, the doubts, the moments when giving up seemed easier. Yet, here she was, not just surviving, but thriving. The mansion no longer symbolized limitation but transformation. And as she looked out over the city skyline, Maria knew the dance was far from over. It was just beginning. On a crisp evening, Maria stood once more in the grand ballroom of the Donovan mansion, not as a maid, but as an honored guest. The chandeliers sparkled overhead as familiar faces turned toward her with newfound respect. James appeared beside her, offering a quiet smile that spoke of shared journeys and mutual triumphs. The room was filled with applause, not just for her success, but for the story of resilience she embodied. As Maria addressed the crowd, she didn't speak of riches or revenge. Instead, she spoke of courage, perseverance, and the power of believing in oneself when no one else does. The whispers that once sought to diminish her had transformed into cheers that celebrated her. In that moment, surrounded by the very walls that had once confined her, Maria realized the true meaning of victory. It wasn't the grandeur or the titles. It was the journey from silence to strength, from invisibility to impact. And as the night drew to a close, Maria and James shared a knowing glance, a promise that together they would continue to dance through life's challenges, side by side, rewriting stories and breaking barriers. The mansion, once a place of quiet servitude, had become a stage for a new legacy, one defined by empowerment, love, and unyielding strength.